There's something you're carrying right now that you've decided has to be handled before you can properly face God. You've made a quiet deal with yourself. Fix it first, then come back. I want to show you a man who proves that deal is backwards, and that the order you were taught is the exact reverse of how this actually works. There was a man in Jericho that nobody would stand next to. Not in the market, not at the well, not in the synagogue. When he walked down the street, people found somewhere else to look. And here's the part that matters. They weren't wrong about him. He had earned it. Every coin in his house had come out of someone else's pocket. He knew exactly what he was. So when the most famous teacher in Israel came walking through his town, this wealthy, grown man did something undignified. He ran ahead of the crowd, and he climbed a tree. Because Jesus said one sentence to him that day, and it contained his name, an invitation, and not one word about his sin. Not one word about the cheating, the extortion, the years of it. And by the end of that evening, this man had given away half of everything he owned. Which raises the question this whole story turns on. What order did that happen in? Because most of us have the order backwards. We think the cleaning up comes first, and getting it right changes everything about how you come to God. To understand this man, you need to understand one job. Zacchaeus was a chief tax collector. Now, in the Rome-occupied Israel of the first century, that was not just an unpopular job, it was betrayal. Rome ruled your land, and it hired local men to collect its taxes from their own neighbors, and the system was designed to be abused. Rome set its required amount, and whatever the collector squeezed out above that, he kept. So every denarius a tax collector owned was a coin someone else wept over. Widows, fishermen, families who couldn't pay. They were considered traitors and thieves, grouped in the same breath as prostitutes in the language of the day, barred from the synagogue, cut off from the worship of their own God. And Zacchaeus wasn't just a tax collector. Luke calls him a chief tax collector. He ran the operation. Other collectors answered to him. He was rich, he was successful, and he was completely alone. Which brings us to the second thing you need to know. The scripture gives us one physical detail about him, and it isn't flattering. He was short, small. So when the crowd came, he couldn't see over them, and nobody was going to step aside for him. Jesus was passing through Jericho, and the whole town turned out. Now picture the scene from where Zacchaeus is standing. A wall of backs, shoulders, people pressed together, and every one of them knows who he is. Not one of them moves. He's the richest man in that street, and he can't buy a single inch of it. So he does something a man of his standing simply did not do. He picks up the hem of his expensive robe, and he runs. Ahead of the crowd, down the road, and he climbs a sycamore fig tree. Sit with how humiliating that is. In that culture, dignified men did not run, and they certainly did not climb trees. He is a grown man, a wealthy official, up in the branches like a child, where the whole town can see him. And here's what I want you to notice. He did it anyway. Something in him wanted to see Jesus more than he wanted to protect what was left of his pride. He wasn't asking for anything. He wasn't going to speak to him. He just wanted to see. That's it. From a distance. Unnoticed ideally. Hidden in the leaves. And if that's where you're watching from right now, interested, but positioned so that nobody can get close, stay with me. This story was built for people in the branches. And then Jesus stops walking. In a crowd of hundreds of people shouting his name, he stops, and he looks up into a tree. Luke says he looked up and said, "Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today." Read that again. He used his name. Nobody used his name kindly. And then, this is the part that undoes people. Jesus doesn't say, "Repent, and then I'll come." He doesn't say, "Make restitution, and we'll talk." He doesn't mention the money, the cheating, or the years of it. Not one word. He says, "I'm coming to your house, today." In that culture, entering a man's home and eating at his table wasn't casual. It was fellowship. It was public alignment. To share a meal was to say, "This person is mine." And Jesus said it to the man everyone in Jericho had agreed to hate. And the crowd? They hated it. Luke tells us they all began to mutter, "He has gone to be the guest of a sinner." Notice, they weren't wrong about the facts. Zacchaeus was a sinner. That's exactly the point. Jesus wasn't confused about who he was having dinner with. He knew. He came anyway. If that landed somewhere, do something with it before we go on. Comment 3 words. He came anyway. Say it over whatever you've been hiding, not for me, as a prayer. And if someone came to mind while I was saying that, someone who thinks God would need to be talked into loving them, send this to them. One person. They need it tonight. So what happened at that table? We don't get the conversation. Luke doesn't record a sermon or a confrontation or a list of terms. What Luke records is what Zacchaeus stands up and says. He says, "Look, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor, and if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount." Now, hear this carefully. Nobody asked him to. There was no condition. Jesus never named a price. Zacchaeus offered it. And he didn't offer the minimum. The law required repaying what you took plus a fifth. He offered 4 times, half his estate to the poor, and 4-fold restitution to everyone he'd wronged. That is not the arithmetic of a man buying forgiveness. That is the arithmetic of a man who has already received it and cannot sit still. Something came first, and it wasn't the money. And this is the order I promised you at the beginning. Zacchaeus did not clean himself up so that Jesus would come to his house. Jesus came to his house, and that is what cleaned him up. Acceptance came first. Transformation followed it. Grace moves first. Every single time in this story, the grace moves before the man does. And then Jesus says the line that seals it. Today salvation has come to this house, for the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. Not the impressive, not the qualified, the lost. Before I give you the 4 things, let me name what this actually looks like. Be honest with yourself while you listen. It looks like praying with your eyes half open, already braced to be turned down. It looks like reading a verse about forgiveness and quietly adding, "but not that." It looks like being useful at church and completely unknown in it. It looks like apologizing to God for the same thing so many times that you've stopped believing your own apology. It looks like doing good at a volume you're hoping will cover something. It looks like waiting to feel forgiven before you'll live forgiven. If any of that is you, you are not far from God. You're up a tree, and He's already looking. So here's what this story is asking of you. 4 things. First, stop trying to become someone worth visiting. That's the instinct, isn't it? I'll come back to God when I've stopped doing that thing, when I've got a handle on it, when I'm less of a mess. Zacchaeus proves that's backwards. He was still a thief when Jesus invited himself to dinner. Come as the man in the tree. Second, Notice that he used his name, not tax collector, not sinner, Zacchaeus. The people around him had replaced his name with his worst behavior, and he had started to agree with them. If the only name you answer to right now is the label your failure gave you, that's not what God is calling you. Third, let yourself be seen. He climbed that tree to watch from a distance, hidden in the leaves. Most of us do our faith from up in the branches, interested, but not close enough to be known. And the whole turn of this story is that Jesus looked up. He was found in his hiding place. You are not hidden. You are just not yet found on purpose. And fourth, expect the fruit. Don't manufacture it. Zacchaeus' generosity wasn't the price of grace. It was the evidence of it. If you're trying to force change from guilt, you'll exhaust yourself. Receive first. The giving away follows. It always does. One small man, one undignified climb, one sentence that never mentioned his sin, and a house that had never had a guest, full that night, because the guest came first. The crowd called him a sinner. Jesus called him by his name. Because every story we tell is really a story about you. If you're carrying something you think disqualifies you, you're not alone, and I'd love to hear it. Comment below. What have you been trying to fix about yourself before you felt you could come to God? You don't have to name it. Just know you're not the only one in the tree. And if this story moved you, send it to one person, not everyone, one. You already know who. Subscribe if you want a story like this every week. And if you want to carry this further, our printable Bible devotional journals turn stories like this into daily reflections you can actually live out. The link's in the description. Thank you for being here. We'll see you in the next story.